guys, this is Miriam Cutelis with lesson ideas in drawing for elementary choice-based art classroom. I come to you with 21 years of arts experience. I am national board certified. I have 2 masters in special education. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and I have my own blog on Blogspot. My resume can be found with that link applied here. I also have a YouTube channel under my name. So why choice-based and what does it mean? In my classroom, choice-based is usually the idea that the ideas come from you. You might not always get a choice as to what materials you use because it's a little bit harder managing a choice-based art room in which kids use different materials. But I find you can still run a choice-based art room as long as you have an open mind when it comes to who generates the ideas behind the art. I want to talk a little bit about assessment first because in the end, it's important to understand why we do what we do. And the reason I do what I do is I really want students to be able to communicate their ideas with a lot more success. And here are some examples of how kids have improved in my classroom over a course of a year. And these are all second graders. And as you can see, over time, they are able to communicate their ideas better. So ultimately, what we want to accomplish in an art classroom is just provide students with the ability to use the tools and use the techniques that they learn to better share their ideas. I find that having that goal really helps me in my planning. In the end, it's all about the ideas. I'm going to share with you a couple of lesson plan ideas, but mostly ideas about how to run an art classroom and how drawing ultimately is a framework by which you teach all other media. I do this thing where I focus students on bodies and movement. I don't start this until about 2nd grade. You can start it as early as 1st grade if they've had art in kindergarten. We do a lot of drawing of bodies and movement and communicate and connect that to how our bodies communicate meaning. We also use our own bodies. And you can make it fun. Notice details of the eyes and other items like fingers are not part of this exercise. I find that with drawing, it's really important to really get rid of this need to be perfect. I do that several ways. I do that by when I demonstrate, I myself am not a perfect drawer. I also emphasize that our goal here is not to create a photographic representation of what we see. I use these drawings as assessments as to where I need to start. Notice, for example, this child did not clearly demonstrate their elbow and knees. It has a little understanding of a profile, but these kinds of drawings help me figure out what goals to set for the year. This slide here is to remind all elementary art teachers that if you focus highly on what kids are interested in, you will have a much smoother art classroom. So we always start with families. I do this with kindergarteners, and this can be done with kids as old as 3rd grade. And there is so much love generated from just drawing our families. We could talk about differences in sizes. We could talk about shapes. I do have another video in my YouTube channel that goes over specifically on how I teach the use of shapes and lines to draw pretty much anything. There's also a lot of potential in here for storytelling or individualizing their drawings, because as they themselves are very familiar, mom and dad or brother and sisters are all very different people, and therefore they look different. And the child here will try very hard to demonstrate that in their drawing. Again, insects are something kids love. And I don't think I've ever had a class where kids are not intensely interested in insects. I think it's a love-hate relationship with insects that really attract them to it. We do a lot, again, focus on how to combine shapes and lines to draw insects. And these are kindergarten drawings, which I find really dynamic and interesting and just simply adorable. Of course, all the drawing that you do can be used for other projects. Here, this was used for a larger drawing or coloring in with oil pastels, but it could easily be used as studies for a printmaking activity or collaging or painting or even sculpture. I put this in here to show that I did use one of my drawing units in drawing to then use the drawings to inform our prints. So in our class, drawing, it's not a unit per se, but it's pretty much the beginning of every other unit. So we're always working on drawing. One thing I find that stops kids from exploring drawing is fear. Fear of doing it wrong, fear of not being the best, because for some reason kids come into school thinking that drawing is the end-all be-all of what it means to be an artist. So if you're not as strong in drawing, the fear is that people will know and you're not going to look good and you'll be embarrassed. So there's a lot of fear about just exploring drawing in art. So the way that I get rid of that in my art room is I do a lot of things that are that don't require things to be exact. For example, funny faces. In funny faces, you get to choose from a list of menu items, different mouths, different noses, different ears, different eyes to create funny faces. I find that when we do this, the kids are looser in their self-judgment, and they are a lot more able to then explore the other activities that you have to offer. Here is an image that shows the menu of eyes of which they're choosing from. And I've spoken about this before, that kids will automatically veer towards the images or examples that perfectly fit their ability. They're experts at doing this, just naturally. Another activity I have that helps with getting rid of fear of being perfect in drawing is rotational drawing with all kinds of things. I'll show it to you, some images here. I find that just using drawing materials to create rotational designs helps kids loosen up and not worry so much about being perfect. The results are very pleasing to the eye and they feel successful, which is Very important for any kind of progression in your classroom. Here are some examples of other similar projects that I've done with lids and scissors and folding. This one I find really interesting. I've always liked the spirographs, and I've created my own spirographs with these cardboard pieces that are different lengths and that have holes on either end. And the kids put their hold the center, and then they rotate the design and they trace it. Either they trace it or they use the hole to make these circles. I think here's another clearer example. So what they do is they use the hole in the center as they keep the hole in the center of their design, and then they rotate the cardboard, which might be any shape, really. They could be oval, they could just be a made up shape. And in rotating it, they get this beautiful design, and the success level is very high, and they run with it pretty much. Again, snowmen are something everyone loves. These are drawings I've done with 4-year-olds, and these are drawings I've done with 4-year-olds. And again, there isn't a child that you know that doesn't love snowmen. And even if they've never built one, they have seen books about them. You can read books about them if they don't have any prior knowledge of it. But again, it's just combining simple lines and shapes to then create a successful drawing. Once they know how to make one, then it gets exciting. They can add details. They can make families of snowmen. These are all so fun. Storytelling is something that I take advantage of with small children, especially. I will write their words next to their drawings. And sometimes, depending on what the question is, I might create a book out of it. And if you have an assistant in the room when you're doing art, this might be a fun thing for them to do, is walk around and have them transcribe the small kids' ideas, because sometimes it might not be that obvious, and sometimes they're pretty hilarious what they actually say about their drawing, because they might take that drawing home and it might be a very meaningful drawing, but because oftentimes families don't know how to look at kids' drawings and actually understand that for the kids, these were very serious works. It makes the parents understand what they were thinking if you actually write in what they were thinking. And if you're worried about ruining the artwork, usually you might want to do it in pencil. I usually will use a pencil to write underneath or in the back, or add a sticky to the back of the artwork with what the child said about their work. In this case, we made a book, so I did Sharpie what they said. Again, using their drawings to talk about their work, because there's a lot of thinking that's going on behind these drawings that you might not be aware of. So setting some time aside to actually discuss these drawings is going to be enormously helpful for you to see their value, and for them to see the value of everyone else's work and their own work. And also they feel valued because you're listening to their ideas. Notice here, there are just a lot of circles. We used masking tape rolls to create these circles and then see what we come up with them. And the questions just say, note, in Spanish, it says, noto que este artista, or I note that this artist. And the next one says, el arte de este artista me inspira porque, the art of this artist inspires me because. And then the next one says, veo que muchos artistas usaron. I've noticed a lot of artists used. And as long as they're open-ended, I don't really think you need to get really tied up with what kinds of questions to ask. Make sure they're just super open-ended so that kids can choose. Make sure there's at least a couple. Make sure you review what going through these sound like. And these will help kids openly speak about their work, but also about each other's work in a way that's respectful and appropriate, but also meaningful. Of course, we use lines for texture, and that is something I will start with 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, possibly even 2nd. Here we explored different designs in a scratch foam. And again, drawing doesn't always just have to be on paper. These were then created for stamping. And the most important thing also here is that we used each other as resources. We put in all the different textures that we invented on a wall, and then kids were able to go up to it and shop for different textures that they might use for their own prints. Again, a huge problem with drawing is always fear, and I do think about that quite often, and I think it's so important to encourage kids always to have supports, and have those supports. No matter how advanced you think your kids are, there's always going to be a couple of kids that need a little bit more support. And one thing that I always have available for when I'm doing things is tracers. And these are all just recycled folders, manila folders, filing folders that I have in a box. And so this is during a holiday. I think this is a holiday themed cutouts, and they're easily traced to create whatever it is the artist wants to create. So let's say the artist wants to create a present, a holiday present, but doesn't know how to draw it. They can easily trace it and then decorate it and make it their own. So what you're doing essentially is creating an accommodation so that kids are still able to communicate their ideas clearly, but not getting frustrated. So here you're pretty much creating a support for them to then better communicate their idea. So here is a child using their hand. This is also a great fine motor activity, tracing a star. Kids love drawing stars, but it's so frustrating learning how to draw a star. So before you get all frustrated and possibly cry and give up, it's important to have these there so that kids can feel successful and not be afraid of coming to art. Here are some others. And some others. Notice how they still individualize their work. The choices are so many that the work still looks incredibly individualized. And here is someone who did not know how to draw a circle, but used a tracer. And in this case, it might have been a lid from a recycled container, or it might have been a masking tape roll, but they combined two tracing circles to then create a bird. So there again, we're doing an accommodation for a child who might have felt unsuccessful being able to draw a perfect circle. And here now they are feeling successful and they're able to better communicate their message. Same here. This is an adorable butterfly. Just look at those lines in the tummy. I do a whole month almost on just circles. We use recycled materials, we use tape rolls, we use different designs, resources. We might use some rulers if the kids are interested. Notice I have rulers here. What I notice is each class is kind of this organic thing that happens. Let's say one kid in a class starts using a compass very well and creates a design that everyone is interested in. They are all going to want to do that. I will often also provide Zentangle examples so that they can go ahead and use Sharpies to decorate them with Zentangles if so they want. Here are some recycled cups being used. And notice kids can work on these for several weeks because they might first start with a pencil and then trace it with a Sharpie, and then they might want to color them or watercolor them. They might want to add collage elements to it. These are some finished pieces. Notice kids use different materials. Some of them use oil pastels, some of them use markers, some of them combine the media. And because it's so open-ended, kids do have a tendency to highly individualize these pieces. Here is a class that ran away with the collage hole punchers, and they use colored paper to then add some more details to their work. So again, I won't do this with every class, but if it catches and they're excited about it, I will go ahead and offer those materials in addition to what they already have. So in one class, I had hole punchers and the kids really liked using them. And then they realized that the negative space from the hole punchers were also interesting. On the right side, you see there, they glued their Swiss cheese green onto their art. So that also makes it a lot more interesting. So here is a class that ran away with Xantangles. So again, you present the materials, you give them maybe some ideas with different artists. You might want to find artists that have gone that direction and then see where they go with it. And just have the materials available and see where they go with it. Here are geometric shapes I borrowed from the math department. And these are so fun. Sometimes if you limit them to one shape, and you can do different things, but sometimes I've limited to just rhombuses for one class and see what they can come up with, and just sort of create a wall of resources and all their ideas together, and we can look at it. Sometimes I've just given them all the shapes and see which ones they go for. One fun thing to do is challenges. These are drawings for our ceramic mugs that we were going to make, and they were to be drawings of animal-faced mugs or creature-faced mugs. Again, I will never limit it to just animals. Like some of the kids are interested in dragons or inanimate, some creatures that we don't yet know or have a name for, or maybe a hybrid animal. So I will usually use the word creatures. Another great challenge is clothing design. We did a sewing unit where kids had to design clothes for their stuffed animals. And rulers are so much fun in art. I don't think people realize enough how exciting rulers can be. A lot of kids, even up to 4th grade, have a really hard time using rulers because of the fine motor it requires, or they're not able to see that you do need your fingers sort of spread out to make sure that the ruler doesn't pivot when you're using it. You can use rulers for obviously perspective drawings. We did a unit on famous places in Washington, D.C., because I'm in Northern Virginia, which is very close, 20 minutes away from Washington, D.C. And so a lot of the kids used rulers for these. And I was going to also mention the supports in terms of drawing is having lots and lots and lots of images. I often will print out black and white images because they seem to help kids be more successful than color images, because kids get really stuck on the color. But if you take the color away, it just becomes these shapes. And notice I also use a Sharpie over the image so that they can more clearly find the rectangle stacked and then the semicircle on top. In another unit I did, these were drawings that we did for a cloth collage that was going to go on a pillow. So again, these are all just sketches for possibly other media. You might use these for printmaking, you might use these for collage, you might use these for cloth collage. So there's just so many possibilities, or even a relief for that matter. Again, nature is something I use to help with kids who have a hard time being perfectionists. And there's a lot of those kids. Nature is awesome because no one's going to come and say, this tree has only 7 limbs, not 10. No one is going to say that. So nature lends itself to so many very dynamic drawings. I am in love with nature drawings from my students. And I think they're always shocked at how successful they can be. Hybrid drawings are another thing that helps kids loosen up and not worry so much about the results being perfect. And they're often very amused by the results. And here is an example of the use of drawing lines for texture. It's a really great close-up of how they use the texture wall that we talked about earlier to then inform their animal drawings. So here the horse has, the fur coming off the neck, the feathers on the owl and the bird on the bottom left. So all those are different kinds of texture that will make their art more interesting, dynamic, and they will feel more successful. Here are some printing plates for our nature drawings. These are were done after we went on a nature walk and took some images, drew some images in our sketchbooks of the things that we saw. You can do this with butterflies. You can bring the actual item to the classroom. Again, kids' drawings are so incredibly dynamic and interesting, and there's a certain sort of breath of fresh air feeling about all of them. Notice here I used a composition book, and again, I am a big proponent of just using composition books for sketchbooks. They're affordable, they have many, 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 many pages, and most of the time what you're going to need them for are idea generation anyway, so they end up working really well. Another example of a wall of resources that the kids make up on their own. So they're now using each other's drawings as a resource. Again, bringing the item in and taping them to a postcard or a index card and using those as resources is also something that you can do if you are limited in being able to take them outdoors. The last thing I normally will do is portraits, because portraits, again, really, really tighten kids up, and they're unable to really relax about them being perfect. They're unable to really feel good unless they're perfect, and that's, if they don't have the skills for that, they're going to feel unsuccessful. But again, this is something I will do at the end of the year for some of the older kids, 3rd, 4th grade. It's perfect. We will talk a lot about also profiles and what that looks like. I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for listening, and please share comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you soon.